We are looking at Genesis 24 today. And then next week, we're going to look at sort of do a wrap up of the entire series on Genesis, on Abraham. So I'm going to read this whole thing first. It's very long, but let me read it fairly quickly, and then we'll come back and sort of break some things down in it. Now, Abraham was old, advanced in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in every way. Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he owned, "Please, place your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I live, but you will go to my country and to my relatives and take a wife for my son Isaac." By the way, I'm looking off to the side because that's where this text is for me, so I apologize for that if I'm not looking at you, but off to the side so I can read it. The servant said to him, "Suppose the woman is not willing to follow me to this land. Should I take your son back to the land from where you came?" Then Abraham said to him, "Beware that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my birth, and who spoke to me and who swore to me, saying, to your descendants I will give this land, he will send his angel before you, and you will take a wife for my son from there. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this my oath. Only do not take my son back there." So the servant placed his hand under the thigh of Abraham his master and swore to him concerning this matter. Then the servant took 10 camels from the camels of his master and set out with a variety of good things of his master's in his hand. And he rose and went to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. He made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water at evening time, the time when women go out to draw water. He said, "O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show loving kindness to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Now may it be that the girl to whom I say, 'Please let down your jar so that I may drink,' and who answers, 'Drink, and I will water your camels also,' may she be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. And by this I will know that you have shown loving kindness to my master." Before he had finished speaking, behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, came out with her jar on her shoulder. The girl was very beautiful, a virgin, and no man had had relations with her. And she went down to the spring and filled her jar and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, "Please, let me drink a little water from your jar." She said, "Drink, my lord." And she quickly lowered her jar to her hand and gave him a drink. Now when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, "I will draw also of your camels until they have finished drinking." So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran back to the well to draw, and she drew for all his camels. Meanwhile, the man was gazing at her in silence, to know whether the Lord has made his journey successful or not. When the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold ring weighing a half shekel and 2 bracelets for her wrists weighing 10 shekels of gold, and said, "Whose daughter are you? Please tell me, is there room for us to lodge in your father's house?" She said to him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor." Again she said to him, "We have plenty of both straw and feed and room to lodge in." Then the man bowed low and worshipped the Lord. He said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his loving kindness and his truth toward my master. As for me, the Lord has guided me in the way to the house of my master's brothers." Then the girl ran and told her mother's household about these things. Now Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban, and Laban ran outside to the man at the spring. When he saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrists, and when he heard the words of Rebekah his sister saying, "This is what the man said to me," he went to the man. And behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring. And he said, "Come in, blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside, since I have prepared the house and a place for the camels?" So the man entered the house. Then Laban unloaded the camels, and he gave straw and feed to the camels, and water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. But when food was set before him to eat, he said, "I will not eat until I have told my business." And he said, "Speak on." So he said, "I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has greatly blessed my master, so that he has become rich, and he has given him flocks and herds and silver and gold and servants and maids and camels and donkeys. Now Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master in her old age, and he has given him all that he has. My master made me swear, saying, 'You shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I live, but you shall go to my father's house and to my relatives and take a wife for my son.' I said to my master, 'Suppose the woman does not follow me?' He said to me, 'The Lord, before whom I have walked, will send his angel with you to make your journey successful. You will take a wife for my son from my relatives and from my father's house. Then you will be free from my oath when you come to my relatives, and if they do not give her to you, you will be free from my oath.' So I came today to the spring and said, 'O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, if now you will make my journey on which I go successful, Behold, I am standing by the spring, and may it be that the maiden who comes out to draw, and to whom I say, please let me drink a little water from your jar, and she will say to me, you drink, and I will draw for your camels also, let her be the woman whom the Lord has appointed from my master's son. Before I had finished speaking in my heart, behold, Rebekah came out with her jar on her shoulder and went down to the spring and drew. I said to her, please let me drink. She quickly lowered her jar from her shoulder and said, drink, and I will water your camels also. So I drank, and she watered the camels also. Then I asked her and said, whose daughter are you? And she said, the daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him. And I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrists. And I bowed low and worshipped the Lord and blessed the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who had guided me in the right way to take the daughter of my master's kinsman for his son. So now, if you're going to deal kindly and truly with my master, tell me. And if not, let me know that I may turn to the right hand or the left. Then Laban and Bethuel replied, the matter comes from the Lord, so we cannot speak to you bad or good. Here's Rebekah before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken. When Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed himself to the ground before the Lord. The servant brought out articles of silver and articles of gold, and garments, and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave precious things to her brother and to her mother. When he and the men who were with him ate and drank and spent the night. When they rose in the morning, he said, send me away to my master. But her brother and her mother said, let the girl stay with us a few days, say 10. Afterwards she may go. He said to them, do not delay me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away that I may go to my master. And they said, we will call the girl and consult her wishes. Then they called Rebekah and said to her, will you go with this man? And she said, I will go. Thus they sent away their sister Rebekah and her nurse with her, with Abraham's servant and his men. They blessed Rebekah and said to her, may you, our sister, become thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants possess the gate of those who hate them. Then Rebekah arose with her maids, and they mounted the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rebekah and departed. Now Isaac had come from going to Beer Lahai Roi, for he was living in the Negev. Isaac went out to meditate in the field toward evening, and he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, camels were coming. Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel. She said to the servant, who's that man walking in the field to meet us? And the servant said, he is my master. Then she took her veil and covered herself. The servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife. And he loved her. Thus Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Okay, let's take a look at this from the beginning. Very long story. We'll talk about that a little bit. It's partly long because there's so much repetition. All right, number one. Now, Abraham was old, advanced in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in every way. I want you to remember that there were 3 promises God had given to Abraham. One was lots of descendants, one was a land, and one was favor with God. And this is showing that even though the descendants have been just partially answered now, he has Isaac, but he doesn't have a wife for Isaac. And the land has been partially answered now. He's living here successfully, but he's not going to get the land. They're not going to get the land actually for 400 more years. But God's favor has really been shown to him. And the Lord had blessed him in every way, not because Abraham deserved it all, not because there's any kind of just rule that God has to always bless everybody, but simply as a sign, but partly as a sign of the favor he was bestowing on Abraham. This reminds me, this is looking back at the very end of his life. Abraham wouldn't have thought in the middle of his life that he'd been blessed in every way. When he was waiting for so many years for Isaac to be born, and it was taking so long, when he was being asked to sacrifice Isaac in Mount Moriah, and perhaps even just now, after Sarah had died, he might not have felt blessed. But the verdict of his life as a whole is that God had blessed him in every way. And it reminds me of the verse in James 5, which says, as an example, brethren, of suffering and patience, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. We count those blessed who endured. You've heard of the endurance of Job and have seen the outcome of the Lord's dealings, that the Lord is full of compassion and is merciful. And literally that last phrase in James 5:11 says, you have seen the end of the Lord, that the Lord is full of compassion and is merciful. I like that verse and that idea. It's saying that if you look at Job's life in the middle, it does not look like God is compassionate and merciful. But if you look at the end of the Lord, the end of the story that you have with the Lord, at the outcome of everything that happens, if you look at the conclusion, the end of the story, God will turn out to have been merciful and gracious and full of blessing. And so that's what we're seeing here. We're through all the difficult parts of the story now, and now we're looking at the end of Abraham's life, and he has been blessed in every way. And he begins to think about his own death. He's old, he's advanced in age, and what to leave behind for Isaac. How can he make sure that Isaac will continue to do what he's supposed to do and stay in the land, and everything that's supposed to happen will happen? So Abram said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he owned. We get this conversation with the servant. Let me say just a little bit about this. Hold on. I'm having trouble getting. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I was in the wrong window. Hold on. So Abraham says to his servant, the oldest of his household. Now, this is probably Eliezer. In Genesis 15:2, he says to God, what will you give me since I'm childless? The heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus, who was probably Abraham's most faithful and oldest servant. So it's quite possible that this is Eliezer, and I'm going to continue to call him Eliezer as we go through this, although we don't know that that's who this is. It's just whatever the oldest of his servant is. He had charge of everything Abraham owned, so he's like his right-hand man. And he says to him, make an oath. And they have this method of making an oath: place your hand under my thigh, which is part of the ritual of that time. And so this is a very serious oath. Now, why does he think Eliezer has anything to do with Isaac choosing a wife? I'm not completely sure. I think he just wants to be extra sure. When I die, make sure that Isaac marries somebody from the right place, but make sure he stays here. And he wanted him to take an oath because I think Abraham was thinking, I might be dead soon. And I want to know that even after I die, my wishes will be honored. And so he makes Eliezer swear this. So the servant asks him questions. What happens if the woman isn't willing to follow me back? And Abraham says, whatever you do, don't take my son back there. That's the one thing you cannot do. He says, if you find there's no woman willing to follow you back, you can be released from your oath, but don't take my son back there. Now, one of the commentators says he's saying it'd be better for Isaac to remain single than to go back there. And that might very well be true. But I think what he was really saying is it's better for Isaac to marry one of the people of this land than to go back there. But regardless, the thing he's saying is don't send him back there, because that would be violating what God told us to do. He said, go out of that country and come to this other land that I'm going to give you. If Isaac goes back there, it'll be going back on all of that. Okay. Come on. What else did I want to say? Hold on. Really having trouble figuring out which window I'm in here. The servant swore to him. I just wanted to make a comment. I really like I think there's something here to understand the realism of Abraham's faith. Abraham is sure that God must have purposes in this. And so he's pretty sure. He says he'll send his angel before you, and you'll take a wife of my son from there. But then he says, but if not, then you're free from my oath. So I really like this. Abraham has enough faith that he's expecting God to work it out. But he's not presumptuous enough to claim that he knows exactly how the details will go. It's sort of like, I know God will work this out. I think he will do it in that you'll find a woman willing to come back with you. And I want you to go with that expectation. But if it doesn't happen, that doesn't mean God has stopped working, or it doesn't mean he isn't still going to honor his promises. It just means in that case, you're free from your oath and just do something else. Just don't take Isaac back to that land. So I think as I look back in my life so far, I don't think I've ever found God to fail in any of his promises. But I have found times when I thought he promised something and it really wasn't what he promised. Or he did promise something, but I thought I knew how it was going to look, and it didn't look that way. I thought he was going to do something, and then he didn't do it. We have some friends who went into debt because they were so positive that God was going to take care of them financially that they would get out of the debt right away, and then it didn't happen. That didn't mean God didn't take care of them. He took care of them in their debt even. But it meant it didn't happen the way they thought. So there's a difference between faith, which says no matter what, I believe that God is going to be at work and his purposes will not fail, and presumption, which says I know exactly how God is going to work this out for me. He's going to do this and this and this and this. And I like here that we see that Abraham, after his long journey of faith, after having learned all the way that God would bless him with a son, Isaac, and all the other things that are going on, he knows God will not fail. But he doesn't claim to the servant to know exactly how it will work out. He expects God will make this journey successful, but he's not guaranteeing that. He's just guaranteeing that they can trust whatever God has commanded and they don't need to take Isaac back. Okay. All right. So the servant placed his hand on the thigh of Abraham's master and swore to him concerning this matter. All right. Now we go on to the section of the story where there is a ton of repetition. Servant prays for something, and then it happens, and then he tells them that he prayed for something, and then he tells them that it happens. 4 times we get the story of what happened with Rebecca. And so already here we're getting the story of his swearing the oath twice. Over and over and over in this story, there's lots of repetition. So I did some thinking and some reading about why is there so much repetition, and what does that do for the story, for the narrative? Why is this important? And the most important thing to realize is this is told in a culture where they had a culture of oral storytelling. Normally, they didn't read things; they were told them verbally, and they had to remember them. And repeating those details over and over and over did several things. One is that it made it easier to sort of memorize what had happened. So the details of what happened with Rebecca that's about to come up is repeated 4 times to say to people, don't forget this. The second thing it does, though, is it marks those details as particularly significant, and it emphasizes that they are particularly true. Every time you repeat this, it's like, don't mistake this. This definitely happened. It's kind of like when Jesus says, truly, truly, I say to you. Obviously, everything he says is true. But when he says truly, truly, he's sort of marking it out as, don't doubt this. Don't forget this. This is really important. Or when a preacher says a really good line and then repeats it again, and then maybe even repeats it again, the repetition of that line nails it down and says, don't forget this. Don't miss this. This is important. This is the same thing, except instead of a single line, it's a whole part of the story. So as we go on, this is marking these things as especially true and especially important. The other thing, by the way, is when the servant retells it, we get his take on the events, which will tell us how to interpret them. We'll come to that later. Okay, then the servant takes the 10 camels from the camels of his master. Let me just point out that he's taking 10 camels worth of goods. He's taking a lot of wealth with him. And this is showing how blessed Abraham has been materially, how much stuff he has. Let me also point out that the route they took would have been about 900 miles along the most common route, maybe 500 miles if you took a really hard but straight road, but it's a long journey. Okay, so let's see. He starts on his route and he prays. We get this prayer. This is really interesting. He says, "O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show loving kindness to my master Abraham." And he says, here, tell you what, God, I'm standing by the spring. If a woman comes out and she says this exact thing, then I'll know that's what she's the one you've chosen. So I want to talk a little bit about finding the will of God and Eleazar's attempt to figure out what God is doing and to understand what God is up to. So the first thing, and I have a couple of comments. The first thing is you'll notice what he did is something which isn't always the best idea. This is similar to when Gideon set out a fleece for God. It's setting up a test in advance and telling God how we want him to do things. And if he does them the way we said, we'll know it was from him. So he kind of does that here with this woman. If she says exactly this, I'll know it's from you. Now, that isn't always a good idea. The problem is that when we set out fleeces, we're telling God how he has to respond. And I know there's been times when I set out a fleece kind of in a prayer, do this, God, and I'll know you've done that. And he didn't want to do that because it was the wrong choice. It was the wrong thing. I was trying to put God into a box and make him respond the way I wanted to. God's sovereign. He doesn't have to respond to our fleeces at all. That doesn't mean he's not real. Doesn't mean he's not going to answer. It just means he says, no, I don't like to follow that arrangement. So when Gideon said, do this with the fleece, God could have said, no, Gideon, I'm not going to do that. And when Eleazar said this, he could have said, no, Eleazar, I'm not going to do that. But it's okay that sometimes it is okay to do it. Eleazar was just, I don't think God is reproving him here. I don't think the narrative reproves him here. I think it's just, he's doing the best he can to figure it out. And it is the way that God turns out to show evidence that he's at work. It is the way that God demonstrates his own power and sovereignty and authority and all that. The second thing I'd like to point out is that Eleazar is not just like, in one way, he's not presumptuous at all. He's not sure. He's trying to figure it out. So he gives this thing, and then it happens, and then you'll see he still sort of ponders and wonders. And then it's at the end with Laban, he's still saying, tell me, are you going to let her go with me or not? So he's aware all the time that he could have gotten this wrong, or there could be more to the story. So I think I think when we try to find God's will, a lot of times that's what happens. God is speaking, but it's not in the kind of way that we can say, he told me this, I know this is how it will happen. He told me this, I know this is what must be. Scripture is absolutely certain, but Scripture often doesn't get detailed enough for us to know what is true in our lives at this point in time. So don't be dogmatic when you're looking for God's will. Don't be impatient. Follow Scripture as closely as possible. But on the other hand, don't think that we're in a world where God is silent and never says anything through circumstances or through other people to us. The Scripture is the foundation of everything, but God uses everything around us to communicate his will and to direct us. We need to trust that, even if we don't know how to interpret it, even if we don't know how to read it. So following the will of God implies discovering the will of God implies on one hand an openness, a readiness to believe that God is at work in my life to show me things. And on the other hand, a willingness to always admit that I don't know for sure. I may have got it wrong. I'm going to be patient and let him take his time to reveal what he needs to reveal to me. Okay. Let's see. Where's my mouse? Come back. I just want to point out that it says before he had finished speaking, Rebecca came up. Later on, he says he was speaking in his heart. So basically, he was in the middle of the prayer, and up comes Rebecca. God is saying, I want you to notice, I am aware of your prayer. I'm answering it. There's a great verse in Isaiah 65:24, where he says, it will come to pass that before they call, I will answer. While they are still speaking, I will hear. And that's kind of what happened here. He's praying. He's hoping God will respond to him. He's hoping God will do something. And before he's even finished praying this, here comes this woman, Rebecca. And everything he was praying for happens. She says exactly what he was hoping about the camels, and does exactly what he was hoping to happen. But let's see. Meanwhile, the man was gazing at her in silence to know whether the Lord has made his journey successful or not. Again, he's put out the fleece. God has answered it, but he still doesn't know. Does this mean she's going to come back with me? Does this mean maybe she's married. He doesn't know anything about her yet. So he says, whose daughter are you? Please tell me, is there room for us to lodge in your father's house? And she says, I'm the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. I'm actually from your father's family, or from Abraham's family. And for him, that's an extra confirmation. So it says he bowed low and worshiped the Lord. I'm not going to make a big deal about it here, but it's fascinating how through this whole chapter, he's constantly worshiping God every time something more happens. He just keeps worshiping God. That's his focus. And he says, blessed be God. This is so amazing. And she runs and tells all her household about it, the household of her mother's household. That means basically that they had an encampment with several different places in it, and her mother's tent was the one she went to. That's the one who she probably felt closest to, and who she wanted to talk to them about. Okay, so let's see. By the way, when he gave out the ring and the bracelets, he put them on her because you can see that Laban later saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrists, and you heard what she said. Let's see. I want to say something about this. Let's talk a little bit about the family tree. Abraham and Nahor were brothers. Abraham and Sarah had Isaac. Nahor and Milcah had Bethuel. And then Bethuel and his wife had Laban and Rebekah. Later on, Laban his wife would have Leah and Rachel. So Isaac and Rebekah, if you follow it, are first cousins once removed. That is, she's a generation later than him. She is his cousin's daughter. So that is the relationship here. That's far enough aside that it's not inappropriate. Let's see. What else do I want to say? All right, let's talk a little bit about the roles of Laban and Bethuel. Her father was Bethuel. He was the patriarch of the family at this point. Normally, he would have been taking the lead everywhere. And he's clearly still alive because later he confirms that they're giving her in marriage. But he's not doing anything here. So a lot of people have wondered why Laban, her brother, seems to be the one in charge. And nobody's sure. One option is that, notice that Laban seems to take the lead. Notice that she goes to her mother's household, not her father's, which would be the special section where her mother was living. Notice that Bethuel plays very little role until the end when he agrees to the marriage. And when he gives various gifts, he gives them to people who are there. So he gives them to Laban and Rebekah and to her mother, but not yet to the father. So, but Bethuel was alive. Some people suggest that this means he was very old or infirm. It also might show something about the aggressive, kind of pushy nature of Laban. We certainly see that later. Also, it occurs, it's funny to me when it says, when Laban saw the ring and the bracelets, he said, come and stay with us. I'm not sure if Laban wasn't motivated a little bit by the fact that this man was clearly very wealthy and thinking, how can we get something out of this? But in any case, he invites him, and they have the hospitality that you always see so often. They invite him, and they tell him, unload your camels and we'll take care of them. But then when it comes to the actual food set before him, the servant says, I don't want to go any further until I settle what I've come here for. All right, I feel like this is really significant, but it's difficult for me to express quite why. It kind of strikes a chord in me. I think there's something about wholehearted devotion to God's purposes that means I won't get distracted by anything else. I won't even be interested in it until the business is done. And at the same time, I know there's times when I'm reluctant to trust God, reluctant to do what he said, reluctant to find out whether he's answered my prayer because I'm afraid he hasn't. And it can lead me to put off finding the truth yet or dealing with things yet, or to hesitate because I'm afraid of what I will find out. I think this shows this servant's absolute trust in God and his absolute commitment that this is what he's here for. So he's like, I don't even want to deal with eating or being just enjoying my time here until I've dealt with this. I need to know, are you going to send her back with me, or do I have to go elsewhere? And so they say, go ahead and tell us what you need to tell us. And he repeats the whole thing that had happened before, piece by piece. His focus as he goes, though, is we get a little bit more insight into how he sees it. He focuses over and over on what the Lord does. He tells them, he leaves some details out, but the thing he doesn't leave out is how much God is in this. So he's like, know that God is in charge of all this. And that's sort of the approach he takes everywhere. Okay, also, so part of his motivation for telling the story is to give real credit to God, not necessarily Laban's God. I don't know if Laban is serving Jehovah plus other gods or if he's really serving Jehovah. He talks about Jehovah. But the other thing that he does, notice he says, now if you're going to truly and kindly and truly deal with my master, tell me. Somebody pointed out that the word master occurs in this section of scripture 22 times. Over and over, Eliezer's focus is to shine the spotlight on Abraham and on Isaac, not to shine the spotlight on himself. This is a mark of an excellent servant. He's here to point to be a representative of Abraham, and here especially to be also a representative of Isaac. Later, when he sees Isaac, he calls him my master. He's serving them both, and he wants to really exalt them and honor them. This is like a picture of how we should be as servants of God and of Jesus. We should be exalting Jesus. We should be exalting him, pointing to him in everything that happens. Okay, Laban and Bethuel say, well, this is clearly of God. Who are we to stand in the way? I think they may have been as convinced by the wealth as they were by the story. But in any case, they say, go ahead. And again, notice that when he bows himself to the ground, it's before the Lord, not before them. He's not saying thank you. He's saying thanks to God. And he brought out articles of silver and articles of gold and garments and gave them more of the wealth to Rebekah and her brother and her mother. Some of it he had held back because he wasn't sure if they were going to give Rebekah yet in marriage. He would have had to go somewhere else and still had presents for them. Some of this is just hospitality, but mostly this is like giving them a dowry. A dowry was proving to the parents of the bride, that the groom would be able to support her and take care of her. And he's proving by this how wealthy. He can say Abraham's wealthy, but this is proving he's wealthy. And he can say Isaac is wealthy, but this is proving he's wealthy. So he's sort of reassuring them he'll be able to take care of her. Of course, if he goes, since she's going to go with him, they're not really losing anything. She was going to keep all this. She was going to have all this anyway when she went and marries Isaac. It would all be hers as part of the family. But he gives it to her now, partly to prove that he's not lying about how wealthy everybody is. All right. In the morning, we have this issue of delaying. Hold on. Where's my mouse? And we see again the idea of delaying versus immediately setting about what God is calling them to do. It might not have been sin for them to stay longer, to let her stay 10 more days, but why? This is interesting because he'd been so long on the road. There might have been a part of him that was like, I deserve a little bit of a break. But he's just in a hurry to get this done because this is what God is doing. And he just, don't delay me since the Lord has prospered my way. He's giving me success. Let me complete the task. And so they say, well, we'll check with Rebecca. And Rebecca says, I will go. Okay, interestingly, we aren't really told about Rebecca's feelings about this, but the narrative is hinting here when she says, I will go, that she's willing, maybe even glad to go. And in the next few verses, we get kind of a picture of the relationship between Isaac and Rebecca. And it just gives hints. It doesn't tell us what Rebecca's thinking, but it gives hints that she's finding this a glad thing and that they make a very good match and that Isaac's finding this good. So, they send away Rebekah and her nurse with Abraham's servant and his men. Later it says with her maids as well. And they blessed Rebekah. May you, our sister, become thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants possess the gate of those who hate them. Why is this here? Because this is prophetically true. She will be blessed. She will become thousands of 10,000s. That's the same thing as his promise to Isaac because of the promise made to Abraham. And her descendants will possess the gate of those who hate them. So Israelites would read this and think, yes, this is how we were blessed. Through Rebekah as well as Isaac, it's just another confirmation of God prophesying that you will be taken care of and you will be my chosen people. Then we have this kind of afterword telling us about the relationship between Isaac and Rebekah. It's kind of touching. So let's talk about this. Isaac had come. He went out to meditate in the field toward evening. To meditate in the field. That word, meditate, is only used one place. That particular Hebrew word is only used one place in the Bible, right here. And it could mean meditate in the normal sense, but it also has the sense of his conversing with God. He was praying. He was talking things over with God. Some people have thought that perhaps he was praying about Eleazar's mission. God, would you let Eleazar be successful? Some people think that he was maybe still processing his grief over Sarah's death. He was pondering and praying with God about that. This tells you something about Isaac. It tells you about his faith, which is pretty incredible considering the last thing we saw, he was about to be sacrificed on Mount Moriah. But he believes and he's trusting in God and he's meditating and praying with God. And maybe praying about Eleazar being successful. And he looks up and here comes camels right as he's praying. An answer to his prayer right as he's praying it. Or he looks up grieving for his mother and here come the camels. It makes me think of when Adam saw Eve after he woke up and said, oh, bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh, this is exactly who I was needing. I sort of imagine Isaac being very excited here and thinking, this is what I was longing for, is a partner, a companion to share my life with me. And then we switch to Rebecca, and she sort of does the same thing. She sees Isaac walking towards her. So she says, who is that? And he says, he's my master. And she gets off the camel and walks toward him. She's not riding up the camel and she's like, I want to go and talk to him myself. He's my master. And she took her veil and covered herself. It's not hiding from him. It's presenting herself in an appropriate way as his bride to be. She's presenting herself as his future bride. And the servant told Isaac all the things he'd done. Basically, he filled him in on the whole story. And then it just says that Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent. I think the idea is that she was going to live there, that this now became her home. And he took Rebekah, and she became his wife. This probably didn't happen instantly in that hour. It probably took some days. But this is what happened next, is she became his wife. And then usually it says, and he knew her in other verses of Scripture, meaning they just had physical relations. But here it says he loved her, and he was comforted after his mother's death. So I think it's not just talking about the physical aspect. I think it's saying that he did love her and she loved him and she became the companion and the partner to him in his life. And she was a comfort to him in her companionship after his mother's death. And this is this is the rest of the story. So I think it's saying there was a lot more to this. Now, 3 closing thoughts. Number 1, a lot of people think that the whole story of Isaac and Rebekah is it's an allegory of Jesus and his church. That the servant comes, I don't know who the servant would be, to get the church and bring us to Christ one day. And that's possible. But I have 2 other thoughts. Second is this reminds me of the verse in Proverbs 19:14. House and wealth are an inheritance from fathers, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. Abraham could give Isaac house and wealth, which would make him a good match, but he couldn't give him a prudent wife. That had to come from God. And what we see here is that once again, God is providing for Abraham by providing for Isaac. One person, and then finally, let me just mention one Christian writer and an author says Isaac is kind of interesting because we see Abraham, we see all these struggles and triumphs that he had. We see Jacob, we have all these struggles he had. But Isaac, we're told almost nothing about. Isaac just simply receives. Isaac just gets things. God gives him Rebekah. Later, he gives him children. And Isaac just basically lives in the gap between Abraham and Jacob. You don't see any struggles. You don't see any trials. You just see Isaac being given things. And this author said Isaac is a picture of who we are in Christ. It's a picture that in Christ, sometimes we're not needing to struggle or to fight or to be in the battle. Sometimes we do. But sometimes we're just in a place of receiving what God has for us. So this is a picture of Isaac, but it's also, again, part of the blessing of Abraham. God has promised that Abraham will have all these descendants through Isaac, and here he is fulfilling the next part of that process. Okay, see you next week. Thanks.